All right, I hereby call the regular meeting of the LASD Board of Trustees to order. The recording and/or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, and the recording and/or broadcast may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. I'll start by calling the roll. Ms. Spicer.
Here.
Mr. Talio.
Here.
Ms. Shukay.
Here.
Mr. Ivanovich.
Here.
I am here. All board members are present. We'll move on to D2, agenda approval. Do you have any comments or motions on the agenda?
I'd like to move that we approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Motion to approve the agenda made by Vladimir, seconded by Sally. I will call the roll. Mr. Talio.
Yes.
Ms. Spicer.
Yes.
Ms. Shukay.
Yes.
Mr. Ivanovich.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. D3, closed session report. No action was taken in closed sessions. We move on to D4, superintendent's update. Mr. Baer.
Yeah, good evening. Good to see you again. I just have a couple of updates. We welcomed second and third graders back to campuses today. Very exciting day as I was out there to see them return. We have about right around 550 second and third graders come back to our 7 campuses in person. So that was exciting to see. I just want to make sure you're aware also that we have expanded our COVID-19 asymptomatic testing partnership with El Camino. We have expanded that to include students. At this point, students will be in person. Also, the City of Mountain View contacted me. They asked for just an update, short information item on our reopening. So I'll be providing that on the 17th of November in just a week from tomorrow to Mountain View City Council. Wanted to make you aware of that. That's it, Brian.
All right, thank you. Moving on to E, the consent calendar. Does anyone have comments on the consent calendar? Anything you want to poll? Any motions you would like to make?
I'd like to move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second.
Motion to approve consent items E1 to E4 as presented, made by Vladimir, seconded by Sally. Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the roll. Steve.
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
Sally.
Yes.
Vladimir.
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to section F, employee requests to address the board. I see Amanda Zangi here to speak for LATA.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how everyone? LETA would like to thank administration for visiting campus today to support the 2nd and 3rd grade start. As a special education teacher that was one of the first to start in-person learning, it is great to see the campuses come back to life with students, staff, and teachers. I also want to pause and acknowledge that LASD has done an amazing work during this time. As someone that was part of the think tank task force in the spring and bargaining, we have accomplished many things that were discussed and are put into action to create a safe return for all. LHA looks forward to continue the work together with LASD to survive this pandemic school year. And teachers are looking forward to the opportunity for additional time off during Thanksgiving, as it was created some flexibility for conferences. So as part of LHA and exec board, thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have anyone here from CSEA, so we will move on to section G, community comments. This time is reserved for citizens and employees to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make brief comments or ask clarifying questions. Do we have anyone who would like to make such comment? To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Anyone for community comments? Seeing none, we will move on to our action discussion items, starting with H1, report on opening of schools, blended learning for grades 6 through 8. Staff will review planning and proposals for the return of students to campuses in grades 6, 7, and 8. Mrs. McGonigal.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We are excited to be here tonight to talk about our 6-8 program and bringing students back to our campuses. We have Bhavna Narula, the principal over at Block, and Keith Rocha joining us, principal from Egan. I will talk a little bit about the 6th grade program, and then Keith and Bhavna are going to talk about the junior high program as we prep to bring students back on campus. Next slide, Marcy. So, of course, at the core of our discussion and brainstorming and problem solving is really this important piece about balancing that idea of health and safety with in-person learning. All of the work around bringing students back to campus has been complicated, but it is especially complicated when we think of our 6-8 students, and we'll talk about some reasons why that is. But I want to just make sure the board remembers how important it is that we are planning to bring students back. Amanda talked about it a little bit earlier, but we've done so much planning in the background, and we know that our students, those whose families choose to bring them back in person, are really thriving, not only in their academics, but with that social and emotional component. And it is worth the effort of going through this kind of crazy planning process. And when we think about our adolescent students, I think they're in a really interesting space. A lot of our very young students, their families still drive their social experience. But when you hit this adolescent and early adolescent age, it's absolutely appropriate for mom and dad to kind of be more hands-off in their social world, but without the construct of school and coming to school. A lot of our adolescents and pre-adolescents are really struggling to find that social connection that they're used to having through the school experience. So we are excited to present to you tonight our plans for getting kids back on campus. Next slide. So we've worked closely with our amazing nursing team to really understand what those differences are between bringing our elementary and young students back on campus and when we think about our middle school age students. So we know you guys have seen this graphic from the Santa Clara County Public Health Department many times, but we know that organizing principle is really around stable cohorts for our younger children. And as we get to the middle there, we're really talking more about the principle of mandatory physical distancing for students and staff, teachers and students, student to student at all time. And of course, continuing on with our face covering mandate. So in both of our plans that we're presenting tonight, just remember that all of our students and staff do a daily health screener prior to coming onto campus, and that as we arrange for our 6-8 students to come to campus, it's really about having that stable seating arrangement where kids will be assigned to a seat. That seat will always be 6 feet apart. Students will maintain that 6-foot spacing at all times during their day. That includes brunch or recess or a lunchtime, arrival and departure. So it just adds a little bit of a layer of complexity. And then because we're in our 6-8 realm, we have teacher rotations happening, class rotations with typically a single rotation in 6th grade and multiple rotations in junior high. So as those courses continue in our blended model, students will remain in a class and teachers will rotate and then maintain that 6-foot distance. So just a little bit different than what we've been looking at for our primary students and our younger students coming onto campus. Next slide. So as we have worked through these plans that you'll see tonight here. I wanted to make sure that you realize it's not just Sandra, Keith, and Bhavna coming up with some plans to share with you, but that there was a great deal of teacher consultation, both with the 6th grade teachers and with our junior high teachers. And then our elementary principal group as well really was a great partner for me as we came to a recommendation around our 6th grade program. So we appreciate the partnership of our teachers because we all have the best interests of our students and our staff in mind as well. Next slide. So some challenges when we think of our 6th grade program. A few I wanted to highlight for you today. One is you've heard from our 6th grade teachers multiple times how they kind of feel like the odd man out. They're not really elementary school, even though they're on our elementary school, but we have not yet moved to our middle school model. So they always feel like they're stuck in the middle a little bit. And one of the benefits of that is that every school kind of operates in its own little world. So a challenge as we've come to developing a plan is that every school has done their rotations differently. And this is a historical fact. Some of our teachers, some of our school sites, everybody now has 2 separate teachers, but some of them core the subjects a little bit differently. So it just provides a different challenge when we think about developing that program and what rotations will look like. Of course, I talked about that idea of 6 foot, maintaining the 6 foot distance at all times. I know our principals are especially worried, as our teaching staff, but just the challenge of monitoring that distance, it's very different than reminding a kindergartner to wear your mask appropriately or what have you. Nobody wants to get into the business of chasing down 11 and 12-year-olds and trying to kind of keep that distance apart. We want the experience for our kids on campus to be really positive and not constantly hounding them for the way that, they're pushing those limits of independence and free will, which is great, but does pose a challenge. And then finally, this idea of dense content. You hit 3rd grade and content starts ramping up, 4th grade, 5th grade, and we get to 6th grade is really this window where content shifts. And we are so thankful that we have amazing 6th grade teachers who are still multiple subject teachers. They're not a single subject teacher. And the content is heavy. And we want our students to be well prepared to go into junior high and eventually into high school and beyond. So we wanted to develop a plan that really allowed us to keep that core content intact. And as Karen Wilson, our great STEM coordinator, and I worked with our 6th grade team to really think about how can we look at kind of what's expected as a evolution of our K-5 program, and then how might we be creative to meet the needs of our unique 6th grade program. Next slide. So we started out by looking at kind of the typical schedule of where we thought we would start, looking at our K-5 program, which is that hybrid A-B schedule, where half the students are in cohort A, the other half are in cohort B. So when we worked with 6th grade teachers, we really looked at what might this look like for 6th grade. There was some concern about a short virtual check-in at the end of the day, that would not provide enough time during the asynchronous day to really keep students up to speed. So that's where here you notice a slightly earlier dismissal than some of our elementary grades right now. So that earlier dismissal allows for a full hour to have our cohort check-in at the end of the day. We also, because of that shortened time, didn't really want to have both a recess and a lunch available for students because that's a lot of non-academic time. So this is where we started. We looked at 2 different versions of a typical A-B schedule. Next slide, I think I have, yep. So this is not news. It looks very similar to our K-5 program. If you were in cohort A, you would come to class Monday and Tuesday in person from 8:30 to 1:20. You would have some social time in between your schedule. You would then be dismissed at 1:20 and do some asynchronous work so the teachers could then connect with that B cohort. I know our teachers really value that Wednesday time and would like to continue having that Wednesday time as asynchronous work time for students. Our teachers are creating their learning plans, recording videos, collaborating with their 6th grade teachers because they don't necessarily have a like content specialist on their campus. So they're collaborating across campuses. Which is great. So we plan to keep our Wednesday as an asynchronous time with a morning meeting check-in for 6th graders as well. Next slide. So when we think about kind of the pros and cons or some things to consider with this typical original schedule, it does allow for some time to be able to do rotations in person. It allows for some additional time at the end of the day for students on their asynchronous day to have a longer stretch of time with their teacher. Does have some socialization time on campus, but it doesn't really provide the level of teacher interaction on a day-to-day basis that the 6th grade teachers, many of them, not all of them, were looking for. And I know our principals were just expressing some concern around that supervision and what that might look like. So next slide. So we used our creativity as a group and really came up with an alternate idea of an AM/PM program. You know, this is something we looked at originally in our think tank of how we might be able to have an AM/PM for all grades. I know cleaning was a concern, transportation was a concern, lots of different concerns. But as we looked at this strictly for our 6th grade group, it seemed like it was a possible solution. So it was something that we wanted to bring forward. So instead of being split into a kind of a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday cohort, you would be split into an AM or PM cohort. And again, those times are approximate, but it's about 2 hours and 45 minutes or so. Our principals stagger times with plenty of time for disinfecting the classroom in between, because at our sites, we have just two classrooms that need to be cleaned between groups. Next slide. So what might this look like? This really looks like if you were in the AM group, again, the times are approximate, but you would arrive on campus at 8:30 and be dismissed at 11:15. There would be some time for breaks. Within that time, you would have time for travel to get home and to eat your lunch, because you would then go into some asynchronous work that your teacher assigned to you before you left on Monday. And you would continue that throughout the week on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Next slide, if we look at that PM schedule, it's just the opposite. You have your asynchronous work time in the morning, you eat your lunch, you travel to school and get there at roughly 12:05 to 2:50 and have that 4 days a week. Next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the considerations. So teachers, and again, not all, which I'll talk about in a minute, but the teachers who like this model really like the idea of having more frequent check-ins with our 6th graders who are going through you know, their adolescent time, having some social, I don't want to say troubles, but social development happening, and really being able to hold kids accountable for that work that's happening day to day, that they can do great work in class with kids, have great collaborative conversations, set them off to go do work either that afternoon or the following morning, and have that regular cadence and some normalcy to the school year. This model really allows our school site teams to be flexible. You'll notice that none of these models really defined the content that would be happening in person versus at home. And our sixth grade teachers, regardless of model, really like the idea of being able to flex that based on where they are in their different curricular areas, what the kids need. So there could be that, you know, for us an entire week, we decide not to have a writing block because we're in the middle of a science lab and we really want these kids to be able to dissect frogs this year. So we can do that in class because we see them for some time every day, and it allows the teachers to really have that flexibility and build over the course of the week. And then this really does have a smaller break time embedded into the schedule because it's just a half of a day. So it allows for the social connections, but not the big supervision of the other schedule. But we know the biggest challenge of this model is that our families were very likely not expecting this model. And we're really planning on that a Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday model. So we realize that this could provide some disruption to family schedules. And we certainly understand that that is a challenge. The sixth grade teachers were hopeful that since many of our sixth graders are more independent and many of them bike or walk to campus, we know it's not all of them, but that it could be perhaps less of a challenge in that sixth grade realm. Next slide, Marcy. Thank you. So the recommendation, and I want to be totally upfront, the way we left it with sixth grade teachers, and they are an amazing, amazing group of teachers. We could not come down to one single recommendation. The schools were split, but they did agree to bring both of these schedules forward with the understanding that I was bringing both schedules to principals to have a discussion around kind of the bigger picture, including the operational piece and the academic piece as well. So they all know moving forward that the recommendation is the AM/PM model. It is how principals and many of our schools would like to move forward with the AM/PM model just for sixth grade. We believe that it will really keep the rigor of our great sixth grade program, that we can operationally make sure it works with our disinfecting and cleaning protocols. And principals have already been doing some brainstorming, as have our teams, around how can we embed some great social opportunities for students even outside of that dedicated time. And that could be, you know, staying for lunch in person one day a week or whatever it might look like. They have some interesting ideas. So that is where we are. We would like to move forward with the AM/PM schedule, but we certainly want to hear input from the board and input from the community to see if this is workable for our families. Next slide. So I am going to hand it off to Keith and Bhavna, and they're going to chat about junior high.
Thank you, Sandra. So can I have the next slide, please, Marcy? Thank you so much. We're so excited to share about our plans for reopening. I have to say that over the past few weeks, we've had our future students on campus. We brought back some of our students receiving special education services for individual and small group appointments. And it just changes the energy on campus, which I just beyond love. And so we are excited to share, our sort of planning process. So the way we've structured our part of the presentation is we'll share a little bit about our reopening task force and the process we employed. We'll share about our driving and organizing principles just to set the context. And then we have some schedule samples for you to also be able to kind of visually see our plans in practice. Can I have the next slide, please, Marcy? So this is our Rockstar Junior High Reopening Task Force. And as you can see, these are folks with multiple perspectives Keith and I, when we talked about assembling a reopening task force, it was important for us to include teacher voice and staff voice. And it was also important to employ multiple perspectives. And I just want to recognize this group of people, these teachers and staff members who just went above and beyond with their passion, with their creativity, with their hard work. And this is over and above their teaching responsibilities. So I definitely want to recognize that. And as you will see with our process, we really employed a very thorough process to be able to arrive at the schedule we did arrive to. So both Keith and I and Sandra, we are very grateful to this team here. Can I have the next slide, please? Just to set some context of the process we used, we kind of started by why do we want to bring the kids back on campus? Sort of arrived at some of our goals. We discussed our outcomes, and one of our outcomes was to come up with a schedule, a proposed schedule for tonight. We reviewed teacher feedback, both Egan and Clark teachers, over the course of past few months have been sort of providing some feedback and questions around the reopening. And we brainstormed a series of schedule options. I think 10 is an understatement. There were probably far more than 10. And we kind of talked about what are the essential elements of a schedule, in-person schedule for us. And from there on, we kind of narrowed our focus. We built some consensus. And what was most exciting was that we were able to combine qualities of a variety of schedules to arrive at a proposed schedule today. Can I have the next slide, please, Marcy? These are our driving principles. First and foremost, it is important for us that we bring, that's social and emotional learning and support is at the front and center of our whole work around bringing the kids back on campus. We want to build community and provide some socializing opportunities with peers. It is also important that we are supporting our struggling students. While our teachers have gone above and beyond and have worked so hard with learning plans and planning robust live virtual opportunities, we also have students who've struggled through distance learning. So it was important to kind of keep that perspective in mind as well. For our role, when we talk about instructional practices, we had a great discussion around developing, kind of landing on instructional practices that were agile, that were flexible, that sort of flowed between the in-person and virtual aspects of learning. And finally, the equity aspect for us was very important. And I just have to say that this group is passionate about equity. And it was important for us to not inform the entire experience of a junior high in-person blended model by cohorting them by math. And so that definitely was important to our group, and it was important to us as a team too. Can I have the next slide, please, Marcy? And so from there on, we started to kind of think about how do we want to organize the day, an in-person day for a middle school student. While we will review the examples, I just want to review some of the highlights. We want to build, based on the sizes of our classrooms, a heterogeneous cohort of 15 to 18 students. And again, Sandra mentioned earlier, these are stable cohorts with stable seating in the classroom. We wanted to provide in-person instruction in English, science, history, and we were able to add another class period around advisory, guided study, and also for our special education support through learning skills and academic communication. And this is where we plan on embedding the social emotional learning for our students. It is through these guided study, advisory kind of model, which is another class that our students will be part of during their in-person time. And this also will help us sort of do some explicit teaching around executive functioning, continue our social emotional learning advisory lessons. And so that was important for us, and we built that time within in person. Teacher teams will rotate through classrooms. So classroom cohorts will be stable and teachers will rotate to different classrooms. Math in this model will be 4 days a week, and it will be live virtual. And we will share more when we share a visual of the schedule. And so when you think about a middle school return model, what we are most excited about is that there are 4 synchronous days in a middle school blended model. 2 in-person days, so there will be an A cohort and a B cohort, and then 2 live virtual days. And this was important to us as we built our model. We wanted to find a way where every single student had live interaction, 4 days a week. And we were able to make that happen through by sort of looking at different elements of a schedule. Advisory, similar to right now, will continue to be virtual on Wednesdays. And then we've been looking at an extended day for our at promise students, students who need what I call core plus more. And I know that there are, LASD plus is functional at many sites. So we kind of looked at that model for an extended day for some of our students too. And it's important to point out that the virtual students, the 100% virtual school students will be following the same cohort-based schedule. Can I have the next slide, please, Marcy? And just to review, students, again, selecting the virtual school model will receive all their instruction online, but they will follow the same bell schedule as those in the hybrid program. And this is important to point out from the standpoint of a complexity of a junior high schedule, that we have to remember that a junior high student has 6 teachers, sometimes 7 teachers per student. And each content area is taught by a content area specialist. So it's taught by a single subject teacher. So it's important to remind ourselves as we build stable cohorts, keeping health and safety as our topmost priority for our students and staff, that students may experience a change in the order of their courses, or they may be assigned to different teachers. And this is not, this is one of the realities of the complexity of a junior high schedule. While we will work to our very best to minimize any kind of disruptions, but this is sort of the reality when we start to build stable cohorts of 15 to 18 students. That's not a typical class size in junior high. And so this is something that we did want to share today, that regardless of your choice, whether you are choosing the virtual school model or as a parent, or you're choosing the hybrid in-person model, that these kinds of sort of shifts in a student schedule are quite possible. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to invite Mr. Rocha to walk us through some of the examples of the schedule.
Thank you, Principal Narula. That was excellent. Thanks for getting me started. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. Also, I am absolutely in agreement with the amount of work and just outstanding effort of our task force that came together to look through all of these options and then to land on one that made the most sense for us. So I'll work through, just talk through 2 sample schedules. And again, I want to start by saying that these are frameworks that we will build off of as we continue to move forward. Marcy, next slide. So if you take a look at this first option, you'll note that there are 4 days: Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. If you look through this, Monday and Tuesday, this could be a cohort A student. And then there would be a cohort B student as well. So cohort A, they would arrive, be on campus on Monday and Tuesday, and they would go through periods, we'll say 1 through 4. As you saw earlier, periods 1 through 4 would be a science class, a history class, an English class, and then that academic emotional support course that we would be able to build into the schedule. What students will be doing, and we would prioritize during that history and English courses, would really be focused on some discourse, that conversation that happens organically in the classroom that has been missing slightly in that virtual setting would definitely be a priority. So you might see a debate in some of the classes. You might see Socratic seminars happening in some of those classes, scientific reasoning. And all at the same time, one of the reasons we are excited to bring students back is to start building out that classroom climate where students get to know each other, and you do fun activities. And although it doesn't look exactly like it used to, there are still many, many opportunities for kids to come together to enjoy the experience with one another and to learn and grow as a community. I think that's something that's really exciting about those first 4 periods of the day. Students would then be dismissed, go home, have lunch, and then prepare for their afternoon sessions that will be virtual. And they would jump on and they would be virtually learning, continuing with their courses in math, electives, and PE on Monday. And so the similar thing would happen on Tuesday for that student in cohort A. On Wednesdays, we would have advisory in the morning. And as noted, the asynchronous work would continue on Wednesdays as we have done this current year. So teachers could continue their professional development and their work planning, supporting students, grading, all those wonderful things that happen outside of the school day generally, but this also gives them a very critical time period where they can collaborate with one another. Then that student would be at home on Thursday and Friday, and they would start their day with the same schedule. But on Thursday and Friday, it would look just a little bit different, where they would begin potentially with their math block, an elective and PE class, and finish off the afternoon with English, history, and science. So this would be a cohort A student, and we would arrange the cohort so that they would be similar to that of the elementary schools, noting that most of them were cohorted based off alphabetical by last name. So that's what the structure we would leverage to be consistent and help support families in that thinking. Marcy, next slide. So also there's the cohort B student schedule, sample schedule. Go ahead, Marcy, next slide. And it would be the opposite of what we just saw. So on Mondays and Tuesdays, that student would be at home and they would be doing synchronous learning in math, in electives and PE. And then in the afternoon, they would be having English, history, and science in a virtual setting. Wednesday, again, advisory to start the day. And then on Thursday and Friday, we would have in-person sessions. And again, at that point, students would be cycling through periods 1 through 4 with science, history, English, that academic support course. And just to note that academic support course, as I believe Mr. Rula mentioned earlier, would have integration of social and emotional learning, that we would make sure that that is a critical role in that course as well. Students would then be dismissed, go home, get prepared for the afternoon, and then jump on virtually for their math, virtual elective, and PE course. So we felt that when we are really trying to leverage a blended model, noting that students would have live experiences and they would have synchronous experiences virtually, but it seemed with our task force and the work that we've done that we felt that we found a nice blend of all those things together. Next slide. So those are our sample schedules. Next steps. Sandra, you want to talk about that?
Sure thing. So I know right now our principals are working on just the logistics of bringing more students onto campus and what that looks like. We have a training process for each new wave of students and staff that comes onto our campuses. And then we are looking forward to some town halls next week with the holiday this week. I'm going to go back to my little phone here. I think we decided, and Sarah can send this out in the board updates, but on Tuesday, Jeff, you can remind me, Tuesday, the 17th.
That's right, 7th and 8th grade.
7th and 8th grade. And on Wednesday, the 18th, we'll have a 6th grade town hall meeting as well. And we'll have some of our principals there, our elementary principals too. And then we wanted to remind folks of those program switch deadline dates are really important, and most especially for our junior high as they have to build a full schedule. So we're hoping the sooner our families can let us know on or before December 7th, so they can then build their schedule. We have our 6th graders returning on January 11th, and our junior high is open for wide business on January 20th. That marks the semester. I think I might just have a question slide next. So we are here to get some comment and answer questions from the board.
All right, thank you. Is there any preliminary clarifying questions from the board? Before I open it up for public comment, Jessica.
First question, you kind of stepped around, you spoke of it while giving the presentation, but what have you heard from the different, it sounds like you have some of the teachers agreeing to the 6th grade plan. What are the concerns of the people who do not like your recommendation?
I think their concerns focused mainly on the inconvenience for families, that families were expecting this Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, everybody's doing it. We should just do it as well. And whether or not students would be able to get to and from school.
And along those lines, 6th grade, because they're kind of in that in-between stage. I'm most specifically thinking of Covington because it's so far away from the crossings. You have that where there is actually a big distance. So the inconvenience may be an issue, and I'm just kind of putting it out there. Sure. It's less of an issue on our other campuses because there's not such a distance of the neighborhood. So that's more of a statement, but it's kind of something that we need to consider. And then I think that's it for the 6th grade questions. I want to make sure I completely understand the 7th and 8th grade schedule. So from my understanding from your presentation, it's say it's cohort A. On Monday and Tuesday, they come in, they have their 4 courses. And then they do in the afternoon their math and other elective or whatever virtually. Now on Thursday and Friday, all those courses they have, those are virtual synchronous courses, correct? All right, that's what I get from the presentation, but part of me likes to write that literally in the schedule just to make it easier on my brain. But I just wanted to make sure that was the case. And how are you doing this? Like, this sounds wonderful, but it sounds, how are you staffing this? How are you working this out?
Well, part of that has to do with the numbers on December 7th. We've done some preliminary work on staffing, and we can make it work based off of what we have right now. Bhavna, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think both Keith and I have done some preliminary analysis, but we are really dependent on the virtual and in-person numbers to be able to start building schedules. And that's why you notice that we kind of need to know by December 7th to be very well prepared, communicated schedules to kids, because, you know, for junior high kids, schedule is everything. Mm-hmm. And so we want to make sure that we provide them with enough time. And I just wanted to also add that, you know, when you think of a second semester start, and we understand that this is a change for students, right, coming in person, we expect to almost sort of do the more intentional work on transition to junior high all over again in January 20th, on January 20th. Because not only are we rebuilding our classroom communities, we are also sort of doing a school transition as a community. So we expect to spend time and intentional planning around the transition to middle school. And this is something that's front and center for us. So it's not just simply providing a schedule and now you're back on campus on January 20th.
All right, it does not sound easy, but I like it so far. And I guess what it really comes down to is that you'll end up kind of scheduling teachers for periods that are virtual or in person, roughly, is kind of how I'm seeing it.
That's correct.
And magically, apparently, no, just kidding. All right, I think, let me just see. That's it for my questions right now. Thank you.
Other board members? All right, we will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comments, please be sure that your microphone is on. And I think we will give each speaker 3 minutes.
I apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. The first speaker will be Eileen Breslow.
Hi, I just had actually some questions regarding what, I think I have a couple questions, but one first, what kind of factors are being considered when creating everyone's cohort other than the first initial of your last name? And then when will we know, and when, like, do they get their schedule sometime in January, and when is that gonna let us know who is in their cohort? And then I also missed, when is that town hall meeting for Egan and 6th graders? So, that's it.
So Ms. Breslow, I'll just ask for clarification. Of those questions pertaining to 6th grade or junior high school?
Junior high.
All right, thank you. We're going to take all of the public comment, and then we'll see if staff wants to illuminate, and then I'm sure a lot of the questions will get answered during the board discussion as well.
Our next speaker is Jeannie Tsai.
Hi, I just want to say thank you all for working so hard to make this happen. I have 2 questions. One is, what is the difference between a virtual math class versus math block? And the second question is, for virtual students, will they continue to have live instruction 4 days a week? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amy Wang.
Hi, good evening. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to provide some comments on the 6th grade model. And I want to say thank you very much for being creative and not being completely fixed to where you started. The AMPM model to me actually seems safer, as it does not have the challenge of the lunchtime and recess supervisions for 11 and 12-year-olds, which is tricky. It also provides more consistent in-person interaction with teachers. And I think for kids such as my 6th grader, who's a little bit more introverted, I think that will help building that connection with the teacher and provide more opportunities for interactions, not just with the teachers, but also with his peers and friends. I completely understand the family logistics challenge part, but I do think this is an opportunity for all of us, my family included, to provide more opportunity for our 6th graders to be more independent. Of course, understanding some school campuses might have a more challenging time based on distance. But one thing I wanted to provide, just based on one day today, my 3rd grader went back on campus. And he was super excited. And the other plus that came out of that was my sixth grader said he was able to concentrate so much better, being the only student at home, and was able to get his work done faster. So that might be a side benefit to have a different schedule than perhaps younger siblings at the same elementary school. That's all I wanted to say, and I look forward to where you guys end up. But I just want to say thank you for everything you guys are doing and continuing to flex, to create, to be creative and put the interest of our kids and staff and teachers foremost. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jessica Shepherd.
Hi, I just wanted to say I really liked the new model, and I'm wondering if you would consider offering it for the younger grades. I have a fourth grader. That's all.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sarah Elkin.
Hi, like everyone here, I just want to say thank you for your amazing leadership during this really difficult time. And I'm excited that you're exploring new avenues for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I have a 6th grader, and I had one clarifying question because it wasn't clear to me in the slides and perhaps I missed it, but will there still be an online school option for 6th grade students and families that would prefer to stay in the 100% virtual model? And the other question, well, it's not really a question. I just wanted to say that in our home, we've chosen to stay with online because it offers the most instruction that's live, whether that it's all asynchronous at this or synchronous at this point. But this offering of half days is very exciting to us and something that we would be interested in. It sounds safe, and we're excited that you're offering this option. So thank you for doing so.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Zangi.
Hi, yeah, actually, this is his wife, Adiba. So I have a couple of questions, one for Bogna, and the other one for Sandra. First of all, Bogna.
Excuse me, sorry, I don't know if it's just me, but you're very faint. I don't know if you can get a little closer to your microphone or speak a little louder.
Sorry, let's see. I don't know if, is that better?
Not really.
Okay, so hang on, is that any better at all? No?
Not really for me, but we can hear you. We can listen very closely. But
Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, Bogna, I would say you're asking a question. Why would you want to come back to school? Well, Block is such a wonderful school, and we are sad that it's just 1 year almost. It's only 2 years in middle school, and that's been cut, by half almost. So we're keen to get back to Block. So the question is, with the orchestra, is there any plan? Is there any way you could make that live? Because I think that would really benefit from a live instruction. Okay, that's one thing. And then the second thing for Sandra, I was just curious about I missed what you were saying, what the teachers need to do on a Wednesday. What sort of, if you could provide a little bit more detail on that. And with that development day, are you still planning on having staff development days during the year on top of the Wednesday staff development day? All right, thank you.
thank you. I think we did get all of that.
Our next speaker is Jason Leonard.
Hi, everyone. I'm the parent of a 7th grader. He's very eagerly been looking forward to the return. So I was kind of anxiously awaiting these details. I do have to say I'm pretty disappointed. 7 hours a week of in-person instruction by my count is much less than I hoped for. I mean, that's barely more than 1 day. I feel like, you know, your priorities in the solution seem to have been all wrong. To take one example, the mention of equity, I don't see how you're serving equity by eliminating in-person math instruction and essentially minimizing overall in-person instruction. To me, that sounds like you're reinforcing inequities. It's is really just so much less. I thought we'd get to, you know, 50% or so, or 40% of in-person instruction, and the 7 hours is just seems the minimum.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tara Williamson.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Thanks so much. So I know I've told most of you that I have been doing contact tracing, and the cases this weekend and today have been very high, a big jump, 358 cases Saturday. So I know that the schools aren't going to be adjusting with tiers. I know that's going to be separate, but we do have some extreme concern that by January 20th, the number of cases is going to go way up. So I'm kind of wondering what the benchmark is for changing decisions on in-person schooling at all. Also, a few parents have been asking what the process will be if they decide to send their child back to school and want to pull them out before the next deadline. So you might want to clarify that, because I'm not really sure if people are thinking, let me just send them back and see how it goes, and then we could pull them out. But I know that that would be highly disruptive. But sadly, things are not going in the right direction for sending more kids back, in my opinion and experience, but I do understand the need. So I was just curious about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Julie Clement.
Thank you so much for the presentation this evening. Can you please clarify for the junior high component why math is not being included in the in-person teaching? That's it.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Trish Carbalar.
It looks like you're muted.
Our next speaker is Martin Gundemison.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First, thank you to Jeff and the board for all your hard work to during this challenging time to get our kids back to school. So thank you for that. And I also we here think that the new schedule for 6th graders looked pretty good. Although I must say, I must agree with the previous speaker on who expressed disappointment on the 7th and 8th grade schedule. It would be fantastic if we could kind of get also those older kids back to school more days a week. These are, teenagers who are learning through social interactions with their peers. So not getting that more than a few hours per week, we think is, especially as we look at what's happening in other states in the US and Europe, where kids are back to school 5 days a week. And, I know you guys are working with Santa Clara County guidelines, and those are, tough with the 6 feet requirement. I get that's a challenge, and I really hope that will change. But still, it would be fantastic if you could think about ways to get our 7th and 8th graders back to school a bit longer. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. So we will bring it back to board for board discussion. Unless staff wants to offer any clarifications, or we can see where the board wants to go with it, whichever.
We're happy. I know I was taking notes, Brian. I'm happy if it's helpful to kind of do a rundown, but I don't, if you guys want to ask the same questions, whatever way you would like to do it. But I think since people are here, it's nice to be able to clarify.
Brian, I'm wondering maybe if Sandra does a rundown of responses first and then
Sure.
fill in with board questions.
That's fine with me when we do that.
Does that work? Keith and Bhavna, I'll throw a couple things to you, but wanted to clarify those town hall days. So the 17th, and I'm sure this will go out in the superintendent or the board update tomorrow, but the 17th, which is Tuesday, will be our junior high school town hall. The 18th, which is Wednesday, will be our 6th grade program town hall. Let's see, we will certainly still be providing online virtual school as an option. So we have 3 terrific 6th grade virtual school teachers, and that program will continue. So if you let us know by December 7th that you want to be in virtual school, we will make sure. Let's see, with the junior high schedule, the math class, virtual class versus the math block of time, it is the same course, same students, same teacher. The afternoon is a shorter course where the block is a longer, I think it's 75 minutes versus, or 50 minutes versus 35 minutes, 75, 35, I can't remember the details, but it is the same course. So on their at-home days, they have a longer period of time, and on their in-person days, it's a shortened period of time in the afternoon. Let's see. There was a question about orchestra being live. I believe right now the county orders do not allow for music to be in person. And so that's not an option at this time. Somebody asked about what teachers are doing on that Wednesday, and I think it runs the gamut, but especially our 6-8 teachers are building out learning plans. They're collaborating with their departments across schools or across schools and within school. They're providing feedback to students. They're planning. They're doing all sorts of really critical things for our program during this pandemic to be sustainable and the high quality that it is. And we will have one, I believe, professional development day in January for teachers. Other than that, we just rely on those Wednesdays to make sure that our teachers are maintaining what they need to for high quality instruction. Jeff, you might want to speak to Tara's question about the just the difference now that school is open, and you know, when might we make a decision, or what does that process look like if the cases in our county are surging? And then Keith and Bhavna, perhaps you guys can talk a little bit about cohorting and timeline for schedules. Was that very first question?
Yeah, so I do appreciate Tara's comments about the uptick in cases in Santa Clara County. The answer is that we'll need to be working very closely with Santa Clara County Public Health Department and County Office of Education to understand what that timing will be, right? What the triggers will be for that. I do know that the county Public Health Department has made clear that even if the county goes, we're currently in orange status, even if we go to red or purple, as long as the schools are open and not exhibiting case growth, that schools are allowed to stay on course. So I'm sure there's a a trigger point there somewhere, though, that the county health officer would weigh in. But I think that's down the road, and we will work with county health on that.
And then before I give it to Keith and Bobna, the question I think Julie asked, why is math not in person? This was a big discussion with both the 6th grade teachers and our junior high task force around, because students need to remain in the same cohort when they're on campus and the teachers are going to be rotating for those 4 periods. We did not want to schedule students according to their math class. And it just allows for greater voice throughout all classes when we have a more heterogeneous grouping of students. And then a couple people just noted that they're disappointed with not much in-person instruction. It is a really hard balance when we look at our junior high schedules. It's deciding with the depth and complexity, again, of the junior high content areas. You have kind of one or the other. You can put your effort and your staff into in-person, which leaves a whole lot of asynchronous time for the week, or you can distribute your staff across the week, which is where we landed, allowing students to have live instruction 4 out of 5 days a week. Otherwise, it would be primarily 2 days and 3 days of totally independent learning when you're looking at really tough content. And we want to make sure that our kids are prepared for high school and beyond. So that is a trade-off, certainly. Keith and Bobna, do you guys want to talk a little bit about timeline for cohorts and what that might look like, schedules?
Well, I can share one of the questions.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, yes. One of the questions was just centered around how will we place students in cohorts. There's a lot of complexity when it comes to this. And so to help simplify and to connect what elementary schools have done is we will plan to do it by alphabetical order or by last name, and then place students in cohorts by that, making sure that every class that they're assigned to would match maintain the 6-foot distance and safety protocols in place, because those are going to be what we guide our decisions on within the classroom. And then Bobna, do you want to speak to some of the timeline?
Yes. So our timeline, again, starts from after December 7th. And then our goal is to let our students know their schedule at least a couple of weeks before school starts on January 20th. So we will be working, all December to build our master schedule with the goal of letting the students know when we return from winter break, like that first or second week of January. We also have information on when students have siblings in elementary school, what cohorts they are in. So we will be taking that into account as far as factors are concerned. We really just want to make it work for everyone. And at the same time, maintain that integrity of the cohort of 15 to 18 students. And so timeline wise, our timeline starts as soon as we know exactly how many kids are coming back, and then work towards building student schedules from there.
And I know another part of Tara's question was, I might send my kid on January 20th and realize a week later that I don't want to send my child to school. Jeff, do you remember what the next kind of marker is?
Yeah, it's in March.
It's in March.
It's at the end of March, yep.
We cannot encourage enough our families to really think through their decision. It will be a big challenge because they will be building a schedule with, specific sized cohorts in all of their different sections. And to retool that a couple weeks in or a month in will certainly be a very big challenge.
And in some cases, the size of classes are just not going to allow us to move students. We have a situation right now where a family wants to move into 3rd grade, virtually, but we staffed based on parent choice that was made, and there is not space right now.
Yeah.
So it is going to be important that parents perhaps really need to think about that. I was going to say perhaps make their most conservative choice, but I'm not sure that's what they want to do. But just really think about that.
All right, I think I made it through my list of questions, and we're happy to hear from the board.
All right, I think Shelly had her hand up.
Well, first I want to say thank you for the tremendous work that you guys have done. This is not an easy task, and I don't think we can overuse the word complexity. So thank you so much for that. I just had a really quick question, and I think it might be more targeted to Jeff. So I really like the AM PM 6th grade, the way you put that together. I'm just curious for 6th graders who have like perhaps siblings. The 6th grade program ends a little earlier than their siblings would in elementary school. So will there be like a waiting area for the kids who need like a ride to and like whose parents drive them to and from school? So let's say you come in the morning as a 6th grader, you're done by 11:15. I forgot what it was, but and your sibling is not done till the early afternoon. Where would that kid go? Is there a place
So
for
that, I mean, Sandra, I think the answer is that child needs to get home, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be the expectation that they
So they can turn
are
around.
either no.
Yeah, that they walk, they're carpooling. I know we have families who are doing COVID safe carpooling right now. But the goal would be for the student to get home, have their lunch because they have their afternoon assignments to get ready to work through.
Thank you.
Steve.
So I want to echo both Shelley and some of the speakers' comments about the level of work thought that's gone into this. I really appreciate it. I do have some clarifying questions both on the 6th grade side and the junior high side. I'll try to make sure I'm talking to which one. So I just want to confirm that in with the virtual school and the idea that they can gate in on certain times or out on certain times, we are going to be able to maintain that synchronization between the program delivery, even though the models are very different. So the live instruction is going to be, if I'm in 6th grade, I'm there for 2.5 hours or 2, whatever that is. And then I go home, I do virtual. They will remain a level of synchronization between the virtual school. So down the road, if someone wants to come back in, they can do that simply.
Yeah, I think if I understand your question, Steve, you're talking about kind of alignment of curriculum. So the programs, the timing is different, right? But yes, they are working incredibly closely, and that's true from kindergarten through 8th grade across our schools to really be in alignment, very close alignment, closer than we've ever been within a week. So should kids want to make the transition at the point it's a very seamless transition.
Great, thank you. And then and along those same thought processes, the Wednesday synchronization time, are we including the virtual school in that conversation? The teachers in the virtual schools so that they are able to provide input and synchronize with their cohorts that are doing the AB cohort teaching? They're part of that conversation?
Absolutely, yep. 6th grade teachers, they all meet.
Okay.
Probably most of every Wednesday, and regardless of school, they are meeting to stay in line.
And then someone actually brought this up, and I was wondering the same thing, is if it turns out that this works well for the 6th grade, this AB morning afternoon idea, is there any thought that it would work well for the other grades?
Sure, there has been thought of this. Yeah. I think we need to understand really clearly the disinfecting component and the timing and kind of the requirements of that and what that looks like.
Okay. I know that that's a huge step because that suddenly becomes a lot of in a short period of time. And this one kind of applied to both to all at the moment. The lunch delivery that we're doing now, I've still been involved in that a little bit, and it is a strain. I'm not going to pretend it's not. And as we go to this model of especially for the 6th grade, where they're, you have to get home and do lunch, or you come later and have lunch. So is there some way? There's no need for an answer tonight, but could we be thinking about that? Because I think we're band-aiding it together at the moment.
Yeah.
So we need to come up with a better way of making that happen, because I think it's a little bit of a stress. As we found out, the staff that we thought we could use for it actually had other assignments, and it hasn't juggled out as smoothly as we're hoping. So just a little more thought and bringing that into the conversation as you're putting this together would be great.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
And then I would echo Jessica's concern around Covington kids being able to get home in an hour. For families that, especially some set families are suddenly working, that's going to be problematic. And do we need to think about, as a one-off for COVID issues, that for these larger, these disjointed footprints, do we need to think about maybe providing some transportation during that window in the middle? If we can't get a series of COVID-safe carpools together, do we need to come up with a district answer to that? And just, again, something to think about.
Yep.
And is that a possibility, and what does that look like? For the junior highs, we have them doing science live, but in junior high, science labs are normally involved. So how are you going to do that if they're supposed to stay in their room?
That's a really, can I answer right now, or? Yeah, okay.
Tell me you think about it, but just it came up.
Yeah, we've been thinking about it. We will be collaborating with our science teachers to find some creative solutions. Just making sure that the labs that we are doing don't require the classroom, but is there a mobile option, right, when they're going from class to class? But that's something we'll be working with science teachers on, and really it would depend on the upcoming units that they plan to do in second semester, and what kind of hands-on elements that are needed for those units. But I think one of the biggest value with science is that hands-on element that in-person instruction can provide.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that we're thinking about it. I was just wondering about, I know the thing that made my kids excited about science at that age level was the ability to blow things up and do things like that you could do more safely in the science labs than you could do in a random classroom.
Right. So. We'll be working with science teachers on what's the safe option while providing that hands-on element of science.
Perfect. And then one of the other things that came up early on in discussions was the idea that rather than thinking of everybody in 50-minute blocks and doing it, that there might be some more flex scheduling going on. Have you guys thought about, is that possible? Is it a value now that we're going to a 2 days morning in, and maybe you might have science for not 50 minutes, but you might have it for a little bit longer, and then your English live part might be a little shorter. Are you thinking about that, or do you think that is too complex to layer into this?
You guys can chime in too. I know it was originally in our early over summer last spring task force, this idea, right? And we had talked about where you could take science and math for a block of time and then refocus on your other subjects. Staffing becomes a challenge with that because we have amazing full-time teachers, and we did look at those kind of different rotation models, and we landed where we landed.
Makes sense. I mean, it made sense to me, but I just want to make sure that was, at one point I know it came up a couple times in conversation that it was helpful, and I just want to make sure we understood why we were moving on from it. And then I think this doesn't really apply, this kind of applies to all of them. I think at one point you keep referencing prepping kids for high school, Sandra, and has there been, I know high school is actually meeting tonight to talk about their model for the coming year. Has there been any kind of cross discussion about how they're handling things, or any thought process that they brought to the table that you guys been able to apply, or we think we're just going to make sure they're prepped to walk into high school is still our goal, and that's all we're really focused on at the moment?
Yeah, I would say we're probably a little further ahead in our planning, since we've already brought students back and can kind of extrapolate that out. But we certainly, I know Jeff is talking with Nellie frequently. I'm talking with my counterparts. I know our principals are talking with the high school principals. We just got first quarter grades back from our new 9th graders. You know, our students are doing well and ended a challenging year well prepared. So we really just want to ensure that we are prepping our kids to kind of meet the demands, knowing that this is the craziest year ever.
Yes, I do understand that. And my final comment actually is more geared to something that came up from the audience or the attendees here about the idea that in other countries, people have gone to a 5-day, they're already doing live longer. I know, just because I happen to read a lot of English press now because my kids are there, that especially in this cohort, they've had problems maintaining those schools being open. And they've actually had to close and open and close around in different parts of, and I'm particularly talking about England because that's where my kids are, because of COVID issues cropping up and cohorts having issues. So I actually prefer the model we put together that is a little more conservative. I know that it is perhaps not what any of us would love to see, but I think it's the right way to approach this. And I just happen to be reading the BBC more than I would ever otherwise, and happen to track those things in different towns for that reason. So I think that the approach is making a lot of sense, and the work you put in together to make this come this far, very impressive. So thank you all. That's it.
So, and I think just tagging on to that, Steve, and I appreciate the comments, but recognizing that we are working to make all of this fit into the constraints and the requirements that we have to work under as handed down by the Santa Clara County Public Health Department, right? Like I hear that there's a want for kids to be live in person more. We would like to see that too, right? But there are constraints and distancing requirements, and our classrooms are of a particular size, and it is the kind of the rules of the puzzle that we have to now work with. So we're working to do that and to get as much as we can out of that situation.
All right, Jessica, anything?
Yeah, I wanted to go back a little bit to the social emotional time, or just social time for it, and we can answer this in 2 pieces, for our 6th graders and also for our 7th and 8th graders. I think some people's concerns with the 7 hours in person is that they are really concerned about them not having that fun time with their friends. So maybe we can speak a little bit more to that.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about 6th grade. I know we had this conversation with both teachers and principals, and teachers, you know, you have 2 types of great social interactions. One is a little bit more academic focused, perhaps, right? We're having our morning meeting, we're learning some skills, we're doing our work, and we are socializing through that collaborative work and during that academic time. And then you kind of just have the free time during the breaks, the recess, the lunch, right? And so with both of our models here, we don't have huge extensions of recess, brunch, or lunchtime. So 6th grade teachers and principals have really already started thinking about what could they do to kind of augment that, to have some regular, more free social opportunities, some, you know, contrived a little bit, but some planned opportunities on a very regular basis, including the great social opportunities that kids get in the classroom during that social time. So it's definitely on everybody's radar. I know the principals have been meeting, kind of brainstorming around what this might look like, perhaps even prior to January 20th, to start getting kids in person to have some of those social opportunities, or January 11th, whatever the date is. I have too many dates in my brain.
Yeah, January 11th for 6th grade.
Yeah.
I could add on to that as far as 7th and 8th grade goes. We realize, Bhavna and I both have been working with this age group for an extended amount of time in our careers, and know that the social dynamic is one of the critical components of what makes students in an adolescent environment or adolescent age want to come to school. I think it's also important to remember that social dynamics will not look the same this year due to the guidelines and restrictions that they would generally. So you will not see students hanging out on a blacktop or on the basketball court or on the field, and nor should they be downtown hanging out like that either. However, I would suggest and say that what we do well, I think, at both schools is build community as a school. And even though they might be more, for lack of a better term, contrived, we find key opportunities to create that community, whether it's through a spirit day, whether that's through the interaction we have with one another through our conversations, whether it's through our work around social and emotional learning. The students will be having a lot of social interactions that will, in this case right now, might be a little bit more structured than what they're used to. But it has to be that way for the safety of our students. And that's what we're going to prioritize in this. Bhavna, do you want to add on to anything with that?
No, I think, Keith and I have really sort of worked, and because that was our topmost priority, is that social emotional support. I will say that one of our purposes for building that additional class period in our schedules was to provide sort of social, fun, advisory-based community building opportunities in the classroom too. One of the pieces that we kind of have to wrap our minds around is that this is, the non-pandemic world middle school experience is different, right? Like this pandemic world middle school experience will be different. So we are trying to create optimal opportunities for kids in less than optimal conditions. So, it's something that it's on top of our minds. And we know that that's what will bring the kids to school. But I also know, having worked with middle schoolers for such a long time, that kids develop new connections when they are in those classrooms too, right? Like in a non-pandemic world, they don't land with friends in their classes, right? But they develop those new connections, and that's the beauty of middle school, and that's the beauty of bringing them in person, is for them to develop those connections that are missing from when they are in these little windows on a screen. So that's sort of our goal too, and we will be working to intentionally kind of design social fun opportunities that don't require 450 students to be in a multi and doing a fun assembly, because we are not there yet. And I know I speak for Keith too. We would love to do those fun assemblies because they are our absolute favorite, but we're not there yet. So, we'll get there. I remain hopeful.
Awesome. Thank you. I have one other question that is kind of completely different, which I'm sorry. I live with an entrepreneur. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and one of the questions my husband asked and others have asked is like, okay, yeah, we have the restrictions of the county. What would it take for us to be able to open up more, offer 4 or 5 days a week to everyone within the restrictions? My answer always to my husband has been like, double the classrooms and double the teachers. And I guess I've heard not only my husband asking that questions, like, what are the resources we would need? Do you think it's double, or is it 1/3 more? And then timeline. I think some people really want to know, like, really the details of why we can't do it, because A, we can't hire people in that amount of time. We don't have the money. Okay, let me give you money, but I don't think we'll be able to fundraise in that time. So I think that's just to say, like, what do you think, and this is more a Sandra and Jeff question, as to what sort of resources we would need to get us there under the current restrictions?
So that's tied to how many students would be back in person.
Yeah.
Right. That's number one. We don't know what that number is. Once we know that, though, I would think, just based on what we have right now, I'd say it is roughly, maybe it's not quite double, maybe it's 40%, but it's, or 90%, I guess it would be technically, but it is close to double this classroom space, right? Because that's the limiting factor, the classroom space. And yes, we could set up tents and that would work during decent weather, right? It has other complications with it, but we'd also need to hire staff for that, right? And so you can do the math calculations on that to figure out what the dollars are. That's pretty simple. I would say the harder part right now is finding the high quality people that our community expects, right?
Yep.
Because at some point, I mean, on one level, it's, I just want my child back in school.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we want that too. But we want our children back in school with high quality teachers that are going to be able to execute on what we expect, right? And we know from trying to hire right now for long-term substitute positions that we have that exist in the district, it is not a great time to be hiring right now, right? We aren't finding the depth that we normally find.
All right.
Sandra, I don't know if you have any more on that.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
All right, Vladimir?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that the fundamental limitations that we are facing are the 2x space and the 2x teachers that the distancing requirements impose on us. And the other thing I'd like people to understand is that a lot of very intelligent people have spent a lot of time looking at different options. And I don't think it's likely that a parent can come up with a solution that will be better than what we have now. Of course, everybody can do better. Of course, there may be something that was just overlooked, but from what I know about Sandra and her staff and Jeff and Keith and Bhavna, given the constraints that we're operating under, I don't think anybody else can come up with something that's better. In part because there are lots of things that you haven't told us that are constraints to what you can do and what you can't do. And so I'm upset at some of the criticism that has been leveled, especially in email. Jeff, perhaps you could answer this question for me right now. Have other middle schools, high schools opened to in-person teaching? In our area, in the Bay Area, let's say.
So public Palo Alto is the only other school district in the county that has opened similar to what we're doing. Private schools have opened, and I have called and spoken to a number of them, and they are able to do that, to bring their entire class back, because the classes are, the entire class is 6, 7, 8 students, right? So they're able to make that work because everybody has to operate within the same Santa Clara County Public Health Department orders, right? Those are those are inflexible, right? Those are a requirement. So there are some schools that are back. They are generally coming back with much smaller class sizes from the conversations I have had.
Okay, thank you. The other thing you forgot to mention was that the tuition there is like $40,000, $50,000 a year. I'd like to touch on a question that Tara Williamson asked, sort of in a slightly different way there. What happens if there is, if it turns out that there's a significant parent pushback, family pushback on whatever plans that we have going? And how are we going to find out if there's some serious mismatches in that there? Is it just waiting to hear from people?
So say a little more. I don't completely understand your question.
Okay, what I'm concerned about is that we go ahead with a plan and it turns out that it's simply not working for a bunch of parents. And it may not be the majority of parents, it may be a small minority of parents, that it's not working. And it's causing them either stress. We heard a little bit about the issues of going back for lunch and stuff like that. How are we going to keep track of, or how are we going to become aware of any sort of major glitches in the program that we have outlined?
So I think, our experience with the reopen thus far is that parents let us know pretty quickly if something's not working, right, for their child, and we want to know that. So we work to rectify it, right? There are tweaks that we can make to accomplish that. It is our goal to make it work for all of our students.
Okay.
We do want them to be thoughtful, though, about the program they choose, because that decision is going to be critical, both for our planning and for their child's experience.
Okay. Is the intent to allow parents to switch from an A program in the morning to a B program in the afternoon?
Sandra, I'll let you speak to that.
I don't know the answer to that, Vladimir. I know in the past, earlier, when principals shared kind of the cohort, you were in the A or B cohort, that they certainly were open to hearing some feedback and some need around wanting to be in another one. So I would assume that they would follow that typical thing. I've been listening to Jessica and thinking about some of our Covington students, and might it be helpful to do some intentional grouping of students to support some carpooling and what have you. So I think our principals will want to look at the cohort and the makeup and be responsive. But we also, at the same time, have to work with those numbers, right? Somebody has to be an AM and somebody has to be a PM.
Okay. All right. That's all I had right now. All my other questions were covered. Thanks.
I just have a few things to follow on for that. It might be helpful, since the 6th, 7th, and 8th parents haven't had to focus on switching between virtual and hybrid yet. Can you sort of go over what that process is going to look like? We're obviously going to have the town halls next week, but then which parents have to do anything at all, and then what information, if any, I don't know if you've thought about it already, would they provide if they do want to switch or don't want to switch, or how do they make that choice?
So my guess is, feel free to chime in, team, here, that we will hold our town halls next week. And I know Keith and Bhavna have some families who've already indicated that from the beginning of the year, they've been virtual, even though we've all been in distance learning. So I assume there will be some very clear communication to our 6th grade parents and our 7, 8 parents, really looking at that December 7th program switch date for notification. I know our elementary principals have been holding like a parent coffee type of thing in anticipation of bringing a new program on. So I would expect that they would do that around 6th grade as we get closer to that time frame. What else am I forgetting, Jeff?
So I think we're gonna, much like our elementaries, we're gonna want to know from every parent what their intent is, because it would be more problematic to not have an affirmative response from a parent and have to go back and rectify that later, right? I think we found out from our very first cohort of kids back, we made the decision to make sure every parent makes a choice and not just assume that, well, they know they're in virtual and they'll want to stay there if we don't hear from them. I don't think that's the prudent approach. As I said, it just leads to having to do additional cleanup later in moving kids and so forth.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense when you describe it that way, particularly given how complicated the schedules have turned out to be, to really make sure that everybody's seen it and thought about it. I guess my suggestion would be then to think about maybe giving them an opportunity at that time to express what their other needs are, whether they need to be in AM or PM. I mean, given I'm sure some families, maybe not a lot, but some families will have a 6th grader and a 7th or 8th grader. And so maybe PM would be much more convenient than AM because those are both at 12:05 changeover rather than 11:30 and 12:05. So I think it'd be great to the extent that parents can express that and also have a sense as to, I know it's hard to nail down and it's hard to promise absolutely anything at all, but to give them a sense of whether there's a good chance that they can get AM versus PM, because I know for some families it will come down to logistics and trying to figure out where their kids can be and who they can cover and whether that person has a car to go pick them up and that kind of thing. Similarly, I don't know if we've thought about this, but I know that, as you say, at junior high, kids tend to make new friends as they have new classes. On the other hand, in a normal year, they'll have 150 classmates over the course of the day, and now they're going to have 15. So it seems like it might be good to at least give them a chance to pick a friend or express an anti-friend. I really don't want to be stuck with this person all morning, kind of thing. I don't know if that's something we can do, but just cards on the table for my daughter, that would make a big difference in her willingness to come back, knowing that there's somebody that she's looking forward to seeing again, that she will get to see again, rather than being in a room with 14 strangers all 6 feet away from her. So I don't need an answer right now, but it seems to me that might be important. And I think in general sense, it'd be good to let parents know what the structure is for expressing all of these kinds of things. Whether that is just sort of talk to your principal with any concerns you might have, but I want to make sure that as we communicate these changes out, parents have an understanding of, as they're trying to absorb all this stuff, who do I talk to? What's the process for talking through my concerns, talking through my requirements, figuring out what the process is.
Yep.
In terms of instructional time, I think, and Chandra, you and I had this conversation before, the synchronous instructional time is about the same for 7th and 8th grade in terms of what they have now versus what they will have under this proposal. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you talk to as I remember it, one of the reasons that we shifted to block days back in normal times was both to give sort of teachers more extended periods of time, but also to reduce the homework stress a little bit. So has there been thought around that? Because now we're kind of going back to the old way of having every class every day. And so I'm a little bit concerned that there'll be days, the at-home days for the kids, they'll be in front of their computer all day and then might have homework from every subject, which will take them another 3 hours or 4 hours the way it sometimes did back in the old days. So I don't know if you've thought about that, or if you can talk to whether the guidance to teachers will be changing around homework.
Do you guys want to do that one?
I can. So I think that's a very good point, Brian. We in our task force had this discussion. Should we go towards block even within an AP cohort, or should we want to see the kids both days? I think it really boiled down to, we have 2 in-person days with these kids, and teachers felt like they wanted to, and for consistency of instruction, see them both days. So that was one of the reasonings why we sort of did not do block in a hybrid model, even though we are doing it right now in a virtual model. And yes, a big benefit of a block is that workload management piece. I anticipate us having those conversations around homework load, even though students will be seeing these teachers, I mean, all their teachers on their cohort in-person days. So we anticipate having those conversations. I don't think, and I know I speak for the teachers as well, I don't think anybody wants a byproduct being more homework for the kids. And so we will be working through that. We both have systems in place where we are able to sort of think about big projects, and teachers are able to see what big projects are being assigned across different classrooms, and take that into consideration when they are assigning the different project. But we anticipate having those conversations and providing guidance to teachers too.
I'll just point out also that a lot of those conversations occur on that Wednesday, and this is why we look at different levels of data to help support students on that day.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to mention, Jeff, I'm not sure, I don't think you mentioned it tonight or if it's gone out, but when people are asking questions about sort of potentially rising COVID case levels, first of all, the reopening guidance has a very specific sort of spreadsheet about the county's guidance about, but basically based on cases in the class, in a specific classroom or in a specific school, right? And so I think that is still the operative framework in terms of when we would back off. Is that
yeah,
right,
I think that is when we would talk to the county, certainly, right? Because as we have students back in school, I believe the premise is with the county, as we have students back in school, we have a really good gauge of whether or not there is any sort of outbreak, right? Whether or not there is an outbreak in South San Jose, what do our schools look like, and what does our school community look like? And let that be what dictates the need to close or quarantine a class or whatever that might be. Yeah, that's correct, Brian.
And to that end, I think we were working on putting up a dashboard on the district website, right, with information about the cases that we're seeing in each school.
Yep.
Is that up?
That's correct, and that is up.
Okay, great. It'd be great. Maybe we can point people in the
Yep.
board highlights document to advertise that that's up now. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I don't think I had anything else. Although actually, given that you said there was some differences, I don't know if you wanted to, on the 6th grade between the two models, you said there were some preferences. I don't think you said specifically why we couldn't let the 6th grade teams that really preferred the non-recommended model sort of do that at some schools and AM/PM at other schools. Would that just be organizational chaos, or is there a reason to?
Well, that's interesting, Brian. We went into our kind of our organizing principle was that everybody needed to be kind of on the same page with the program. So perhaps we'll chat with principals about that tomorrow.
Okay, I mean, so I can certainly see communications challenges if we're doing two different things with sixth grades in this district. So
Most definitely.
I'm not sure that would outweigh the improved preference. It didn't sound like the preference was so strong as to maybe be worth that headache.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask a question. Did you need, I know that you had a recommendation, do you feel, actually, let me ask first, any other board members who wanted to add any other questions or comments? Otherwise, do you feel like you've gotten the direction? I didn't hear any objections, I don't think, from the board on the AM PM schedule.
No, I think we have what we need.
Thank you.
All right. In that case, I do see one hand up. I don't know if that's for this item, but we've already finished public comment for this item. So if you can please send your comment to via email, trustees@lasdschools.org. Thank you. Somebody will certainly get back to you there. And that goes for anybody who has further comments or questions around this topic. We will move on to H2, LASD reopening, health and safety. Mr. Kenyon will provide an overview of how the district is addressing ventilation and air quality issues during the COVID pandemic. Mr. Kenyon.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I'm waiting for Marcy to put up the slides. Thank you, Marcy. So,
hey, Brian, can I just tell Bob and Keith they're free to go if they would like?
Oh.
Thanks.
They're not interested in ventilation? This is
I'm sure they are, but they don't need to be here for this if they don't want to. Sorry for interrupting, Randy.
Thank you.
All right. I won't hold it against Bob nor Keith. So tonight, this presentation is about what we've learned and what we know now about preventive measures related to the coronavirus. Specifically tonight, we will be discussing measures related to indoor spaces. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, Marcy. So the more preventive measures that are taken in combination with each other, the better. That's what this slide is partially about. So citing some of the recommendations, not only from County Public Health, but other sources, obviously everyone knows about wearing masks and about maintaining adequate physical distancing, practicing good hand hygiene, being in the outdoors whenever possible. But tonight we're talking mostly about indoors and what are key preventive measures. Certainly limiting the number of people in indoor spaces and ensuring adequate airflow is critical. Adequate airflow can happen either passively by having windows and doors open and air flowing that way, or actively through HVAC systems that have fans that basically bring in fresh air and exhaust out the air from inside the rooms. So next slide, Marcy. So in past, we've talked a bit about cleaning and the different cleaning methods and protocols that we have in place. But tonight we're going to talk about other areas in terms of reducing the risk indoors, specifically filtration. You know, that's through a HVAC system, filters, or having portable air cleaners, and also ventilation. Again, bringing outdoor air indoors, again, either naturally or through a HVAC system, and that will dilute the particles of any kind of virus, the concentration of those particles. So we're going to focus on filtration and ventilation. So next slide, Marcy. So key areas of focus for us have been testing our HVAC systems to make sure that they operate properly, okay? Looking at the filtration systems, the recommendations have come down from the CDC and other places to have what are rated MERV 13 filters or better in your HVAC systems wherever possible. Most of our systems currently do not have MERV 13 filters. They either have MERV 8 or MERV 10, the ones, most of our ones that have those kind of filters. So we're looking at whether or not we can install MERV 13 in those and keep those systems running. We think we can. Also replacing filters on a regular basis more frequently than we normally would. Another area of focus is monitoring the air quality, and we can do this by using indirectly by using CO2 sensors, and they will measure the concentration of CO2 and how that's relative to outside air. And you can see some of the specifics here. The target for a well-ventilated room is 800 parts per million of CO2. And then air purifiers. So air purifiers are not really necessary if you have a good HVAC system working and bringing in the outdoor air, or you have good ventilation through a passive way with open doors and windows. But in spaces that we don't have windows particularly, we're looking at getting some HEPA air purifiers for those kind of spaces. Thinking particularly of some of the administrative spaces at our schools and some of the smaller spaces, either in the administration building or nearby. So next slide, Marcy. So in terms of operations, we want our systems, and we are doing this. We start our HVAC systems running 2 hours before school starts, and they run continuously 2 hours after school is done. Okay, that flushes out the air at the beginning and also at the end of the day. It's really important to keep the fans on all day. This creates additional noise, which can be a bit of a distraction, but it's critical for the operation of for the successful operation of cleaning the air out on an ongoing continuous basis. Obviously, limiting the number of students in a classroom, you get more space and you get more fresh air per person. The state code requirements is 15 cubic feet per minute per student. So when architects design school buildings, they spec HVAC systems that will bring in 450 cubic feet per minute, because that is a typical class size of, they size it for 30 students, okay? So a typical classroom would have 450 CFM. By limiting the number of students, right? If we dropped it in half, we would essentially double the amount of fresh air per student. And that's what we are doing by having fewer kids in the classroom, not only for physical distancing purposes, but also for the fresh air purposes. Next slide, Marcy. So it's important not only to get everything in place, but also to monitor and make sure that things are working smoothly. So the CO2 monitors that we've talked about will continuously track the amount of airflow, right? And how effective our ventilation is. So we are about to purchase enough CO2 monitors to install in all of our classrooms and in all of our occupied spaces throughout the district, okay? We are and will continue to perform periodic routine maintenance, make sure that all of our systems are working and functioning properly. And doing the ongoing filter replacement, it could be as little as 30 days. We think with the MERV 13 filters, because they are a lot more effective at filtering things out, they tend to need to be changed probably more frequently than the MERV 8 or MERV 10 filters. So we're looking at 30 days for those MERV 13 filter replacements. And of course, we have different HVAC systems from site to site. So those times may vary depending upon the different units. Next slide, Marcy. So bringing in the outdoor air. So we want to open the doors and windows whenever possible. So as we get into the cold season, like this morning, today, very cold. This is a precursor of what winter's going to be like. So it's okay to have the windows open with the doors shut. But one of the issues about keeping the doors open means that there's less touching, because that's a high touch surface if you're going in and out. So that just requires more cleaning, more disinfecting on a manual basis. So if we can keep doors open as well as windows, we want to do that. And we can have the doors and windows open even with the HVAC systems working, okay? Because again, when you combine preventive measures with each other, that just increases, reduces the risk and increases the preventive measures that are in place, okay? It's okay for us to leave the doors and windows open during the winter. The HVAC system should be warming the room. This will increase our energy consumption, one of the downsides. So a little bit of cost increase, but because of the health and safety, we want to be doing this. And of course, we'll encourage everyone that's in the rooms to dress more warmly. And again, a very important facet is keeping the fans running all day. So, this will be a little bit of a change in, not a change, but be able to adjust to some behavior changes where maybe dressing a little bit differently and maybe dealing with a little bit more noise with the fan in the rooms, fans going in the rooms. Next slide, Marcy. So what have we done? So talking about active systems, these are the HVAC systems. So every one of those HVAC systems that we have in every room in every school has been tested, been cleaned, all the internal coils have been disinfected, all the filters have been changed, and all the controls have been checked. We've got them all working correctly, okay? The controls have been set to maximize the outdoor air supply and to operate, as I said, 2 hours before and after school. And we have importantly disconnected the energy savings devices, alas, that prevent the HVAC from operating when doors are open. So normally we would want to save energy, but now we are more concerned about the air quality in our classrooms. So that's what we've done regarding the active HVAC systems. The next slide, Marcy. This is all about the more passive systems where we have high windows on an opposite wall, high windows on a wall, and then on a lower wall on the opposite side an air vent. So that difference in pressure causes air to flow from the windows over towards the other side of the room and out through the air vents. So all those air vents have been checked and filters have been cleaned. Again, we've disconnected the energy saving devices. All the window operations have been checked and repaired. Some of them are manual, some of them are powered, right? And they have a switch that powers them, so nobody has to actually open the window physically. It's done through this power system. Some of them still need to be done physically, so we have cranks or poles that we're missing because we didn't have to deal with this so much previously. So we've provided all those where they were missing. So that's what's happened in terms of the passive systems and what we've done so far, but there's still some things to do. So the next slide. So we are attempting to replace all of our MERV 8 or MERV 10 filters with MERV 13s or better. So it's been a long sort of road trying to analyze and verify that the MERV 13s will work okay without damaging our systems, because they weren't designed to have filtration at that level. We are going to be installing those CO2 monitors. Just so you know, we've probably ordered them already. This slide was done last week. The order was placed, I think, on Friday. So we figured it's going to be at least 3 weeks. So I'm thinking by the beginning of the calendar year, we'll have those in place in our classrooms. The HEPA filters for the spaces with few windows, they're available a little bit later, maybe by the end of January. Can we get the appropriate HEPA filters that we want, that are the good quality that will work for the spaces that we need. We don't want to forget that we have ongoing monitoring and upkeep, including the filter changes. So those are things that are left to do beyond what we've done already. And I think the next slide, Marcy, is just a little bit of, our staff, myself, our nurses, we've been looking at, and our consultants, we've looked at various studies from a variety of different groups, been to some webinars and workshops, read white papers, all the information that we're gleaning about the coronavirus, about ways to combat it, about reducing risk, about providing the best air quality and ventilation. We've tried to summarize that in the slides tonight. So that's an update, Brian and board members. So if you have any questions, I will attempt to answer them.
Thank you, Randy. Any preliminary questions from board members before I go to public comment? Not seeing any. So we will now take public comment on this agenda item. To comment on this agenda item, members of the public should use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes.
Our first speaker is Amy Wang.
Hi, thanks so much for all your work, Randy. I just have one, I think it's a very quick question. On the one slide where you had all the different ways of ventilation, what is the default operation for windows and doors? Is it open, or is it based by teacher on like any given day? That's it. That's my question.
Yep, thank you.
Our next speaker is Jessica Shepard.
Hi, I was wondering if you are doing the plastic dividers between the students, and how does that impact the airflow? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's the end of our public comment. Randy, you mind answering?
Yeah, a couple of quick answers to those. To Amy, the default is we want the windows open in our classrooms. We are not asking teachers to make that decision. We are saying you need to have your windows open and your door open if possible. Okay, that is the default. Regarding the plastic dividers, we only have the use of plastic dividers in very specialized situations, such as some assessments that are happening for certain special ed students. But generally, we're not using plastic dividers. We don't expect to have any impact on the airflow or the air quality in our classrooms one way or another, but we're not generally using them, Jessica. And Brian, I should have mentioned in my presentation, I've mentioned this previously at a board meeting, but we have, when I say all the work that's been done, we have not only had our maintenance team, but we've had a group of consultants. We've had the HVAC company and their experts out. We have our architect and the engineers that they employ that are specialists in this area, working in tandem along with our folks, going through every system, every classroom, and inventorying and taking care of all that and making all the recommendations up to today. That continues to go.
Thank you. Other board comments, questions? I guess just to add on to that, Randy, in terms of the plastic dividers, it's my understanding that those sort of haven't been strongly recommended by the county, precisely because the emphasis on ventilation, the emphasis is really the air in the room. So which obviously flows around the divider. So the primary focus has been on that. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay. Steve.
Just one, you mentioned a couple times trying to get the whatever 13 version of the filters. If that doesn't come to be, or we can't do that, are we at any risk? Or are we just replace filters more frequently? You'll be dodging it. I mean, what's the trade-off there if we can't get where we want to go?
So we think that we can, sorry, I was interrupted here. We think we can get MERV 13 filters pretty much on all of our units. We originally did not think that would work, but we have more recently tested them, Steve. So I think we're actually looking at some MERV 16s as well as MERV 13, which is a little more filtration. So I don't think it's an issue.
Okay. Other board members? Questions, comments? Jessica?
All the consultants and the filters and the CO2 stuff, where is this coming from in our budget?
So far we've been using our learning loss mitigation funding. That's 1.6 million plus from a variety of different sources added together. The regulations for that funding was increased to include anything related to air quality, ventilation, any kind of things like that. So we're using those funds to pay for all this, including the CO2 monitors that we'll be ordering.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Other hands? Don't see any. I don't think I have anything else either. Thank you, Randy, for you and your team and all the work. I know this is a ton of work in and of itself. All right, I think that is it for H2. We will move on to section I, board and administration comments. I'd like to preface this as we go around the Zoom table here, and thank you to Marcy for sending out an email earlier. There is an election coming up for the county committee on school district organization. We get one vote kind of as a board for any of the contested elections, of which there is one. Hopefully you all saw that. If you didn't, I apologize, it went out late this afternoon. If you want to express an opinion between the two candidates in the contested election, as you go around with your comments, I will compile that I think last December, the last time we reorganized, we aligned sort of responsibility for responding to that election with board presidency. So I will be doing that. The deadline is November 20th, which is why we're talking about it at this meeting. So I'm just gonna go around my boxes. So Steve.
Sure. On that topic, I was leaning towards I'm horrible with names, you all know that, the female candidate personally, but other than that, really didn't have a strong opinion one way or the other on those. The only other thing I wanted to bring up, and I did attend the County School Board Association meeting. One of the things that came up during that conversation, there was a lot of things that Dr. DeWan had pushed out that I haven't read yet, that I got to go back through and try to work my way through from presentations, was more on the conversation on the back end of it, which was a couple of things that surprised me, that counties were still, groups were still trying to figure out what we just discussed. They hadn't even gotten this far in the process. So I wanted to flag the fact that what we're grappling with, I think we're actually remain a little ahead of the curve from what I'm seeing or heard on that meeting. And so, kudos to the team here for putting that together. The other thing that I heard that surprised me again was the idea of food ambiguity, and where there was concerns about families not getting access to food. And when we closed down, one of the things that Jessica started and we ramped up, and now we're hoping to transition to CSA eventually, was an outreach into the communities where we actually were delivering lunches. We've actually been doing food delivery as well. So again, it was hugely different listening to the rest of the county going, oh, we have this problem. What are we going to do? What should we do about it? Whereas I look at the community we live in, it actually been solved. And CSA actually commented that it's been solved. It's unusual for them to step in and see a program that had been not only thought of, but actually delivered and maintained for as long as we've been able to maintain it. So 2 reasons for bringing it up. One is, as CSA picks it up, I know they could use support to help to keep that going. So please keep, if you're thinking of places to donate money in the future, they'd be a great one to donate money towards. Anybody listening at this stage still. And also just to call out the fact that that was something that was pulled off. You know, Jason on the district side and his family, for God's sakes, were out there pulling tables, pulling cans, making things happen. So just want to make sure we didn't lose sight of the fact that that was pretty unique. That was something we were able to pull off. That's it.
All right, Jessica.
Echo a lot of what Steve had to say about the Carbolars. Also Suzanne Casso on the produce side of things, and living classroom. And it was great that we got on top of everything, that all of us as a team, whether it's staff, whether it's board members, making things happen for our community members. But CSA, by the end of the calendar year, will be taking over the distribution from us. They're hoping to have still some volunteer help from our parents and the people that have already been doing it with us. But they're going to be able to give it a lot better structure than we had, and more regularity, and also, excuse me, be able to give more services than we could, which I'm really excited about. And they're already sending me messages as, you know, somebody that's been coordinating with them about all the different types of services to make sure that our families in our school community know about them. So I'm really excited about that, and definitely need to think about them when giving any time of the year. And what else did I want to say? I think that is it. Thank you. Jody Muirhead. I vote for Jody.
Sally.
I don't have any comments, but I was going to also vote for Jody Muirhead.
Vladimir?
I have no preference, and I don't have anything to report, except, I don't know, Brian, if you noticed or not, probably there's something wrong with your microphone, and you come across. So
Oh, sorry.
Okay, it's understandable.
All right, Chandra.
I guess I will say this Thursday night, we have an LAEF board meeting, and we'll be presenting on giving a program update around STEM. Grace Choi and Karen Wilson will be giving an update then. So we look forward to that on Thursday night. I might be sending you all just a little bit of detail as the CDE unveils its plan for the new LCAP. And, you know, we did our abbreviated, I always get, I get my acronyms messed up, but my attendance and accountability. Now we're looking toward a whole new 3-year LCAP that needs to be designed and vetted with stakeholder feedback to be adopted in June, when we have no baseline data from kids and we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I know my counterparts and
you'll do great, Sandra.
Yeah, I know. Educators have given a lot of feedback to our county, and then our county has done a great job representing us to the state. But if it starts coming up at your CSBA meetings, a little feedback around the unreasonableness of building a 3-year plan in the middle of a pandemic would be much appreciated. I'll give you some details though. That's it.
All right, Randy, anything else?
I have nothing to add, Brian.
Okay, Jeff, anything to add?
Just share that indications from the state are that the CASP testing, the standardized testing, will be abbreviated this year. Unclear exactly what that means, but apparently there is some recognition on that front that we are in the middle of a pandemic. So that's a positive.
And parents should know that they can opt out.
That's true. Oh, and Brian, I'll just say also that we are in the midst of report cards and conference season coming up. So our teachers will be working very hard on that. So thanks in advance to all of them. But we know it's really an important time of year.
Okay, I don't think I have a ton else to add myself, so I think we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.